Alright, it's time for another update and forecast on all the various wildfires going on throughout California. As always, we're going to be looking at the Caldor Fire, the Dixie Fire, the Mcfarland Fire, the Monument Fire, the Antelope Fire, but then we also have some new fires to look at in the mix, including the French Fire, the Westward Fire, and the most recent one to come up, the South Fire as well. So, as always, we're going to look at all the most recent updated numbers for these, and then we're also going to focus on the fire weather forecast to try to predict what these fires are going to do in the future. But before we really start diving into the individual fires, I do want to point out what's going on with the South Fire right now. I was just putting this report together, and I always check Twitter right before I go live just to make sure there's no new information, and I was just seeing post after post about the South Fire in San Bernardino County, where that's leading to some new evacuation warnings right now. This report right here was 3 hours ago. It says it's 300 acres, 0% containment, and I was seeing a number of different videos. So first thing I should say in this video is if you are in that area and you tune into this live, be sure to check your local evacuation orders and warnings, because it looks like that is a situation that is currently developing, and we will spend some time looking at this fire throughout the course of this video. You can see where this camera is right here, where it's facing. You can see San Bernardino, so it's facing to the east right there, and this is what the South Fire has looked like over the last 3 hours. So you can see fairly large amount of smoke coming off of it. That one report that we saw said that 6 homes had been burned at this point, but that post was from 3 hours ago. So again, this is a developing situation. We're going to try to follow it throughout the course of this video, but I just wanted to mention this first because did want to just put forward that if you live in this area, be sure to check the local evacuation orders and warnings to make sure you're up to date and you have evacuated if you have had an order put in place. Now, one thing I will point out here is it does look like they're using some retardant on this fire already. You can see that little red flash right there. You can actually see 2 of them if you look very closely on the bottom of the screen right there. So it does look like they have some aircraft on this. I do know there was I saw a large number of engines going up to fight this blaze, so that is definitely one we're going to have to keep an eye on throughout the course of this live stream. But before we do, that's going to be a much more interactive approach once we get to the South Fire, the Westward Fire. First, I do want to just go over some of these larger fires that we've been talking about for about 2 or 3 weeks now, get out the most recent information there, and then also look at the fire weather forecast. And I think the best one to start with is the Caldor Fire, because this looks to be the most active one throughout the day today, and especially on that northeastern side. And that really is the big concern on the Caldor Fire moving forward, because right now they do have, and you do see that one little new fire pop up right there. I'll have to check what the name was on that one. But the northeastern section of the Caldor Fire is the big concern going forward, I think, over the next 5 days, because that has the potential to reach into a large number of structures around the south shore of Lake Tahoe. We'll look at that structure map in a second, but I think that's the big concern moving forward. Basic summary of the fire weather forecast is over the next couple of days, we're going to transition to a much warmer, drier pattern, but there's going to be reduced winds, which is, I think, going to be great news for especially the Caldor Fire, because it's those winds that have been pushing the fire farther and farther up to the northeast, the exact place that we don't want it to go. So, quick summary on that forecast is good news is that the winds should be dying down over the next couple of days. But then when I show the fire weather forecast for especially the Caldor Fire as we get into Monday and Tuesday, there's going to be a big concern there moving forward. So we're going to take a very close look at that. But first, I always do like to just look at the overall fire perimeter map to get an eye on what's going on. We have the river complex up here, the Monument Fire. We're going to be looking at some of those hotspots that look like they are getting dangerously close, and if not already into the Hayfork area. We're going to look at the Mcfarland Fire, which you can see tomorrow from 8 a.m. through 11 a.m. Let's see. is effective from 8/27. So that is a couple of days away actually at this point. 8/27 8 a.m. through 8/28 11 a.m. We are going to have that fire weather watch over the Mcfarland Fire due to just the usual things, low relative humidity, gusty winds, and we'll have to keep an eye on and see if that extends over some of our other fires like the Dixie Fire and the Monument Fire, but that is one thing to keep a lookout for there. But when it comes to the Dixie Fire, you can see majority of those hotspots around that same two areas that we've been seeing them over the last week. It's that area just south and east of Taylorsville where you see a lot of hotspots there, and on the northern edge of the fire as well. You can actually see that on the satellite imagery throughout the day today, the two distinct spots on the Dixie Fire that are burning. Based on how far away that is, you would almost think that it's two separate fires, but it's really just the two separate edges of the Dixie Fire where we're seeing those large pyrocumulus clouds. And if we go back to right there, you can see that it matches up with that satellite imagery where we see those hotspots. And just quickly go over the Dixie Fire numbers. Dixie Fire is at about 3/4 of a million acres, but we are up to 45% containment. I'll show that containment map later in this video. So that's at least some good news right there, that the containment is at least up on the Dixie Fire. And then when it comes to the Caldor Fire, this is going to be the first fire that we really dive into throughout the course of this video. You can see lots of hotspots. That's why this one's going to be the first one we dive into. This is the one where we've seen the most activity throughout the day today. You can see all of that smoke being produced going right into Tahoe. I have a number of friends up in Tahoe right now, and they're saying the air quality is just absolutely terrible, and you can see why, with those southwesterly winds just pushing that smoke from the Caldor Fire directly into Lake Tahoe. So quick look at the Caldor Fire. It's at 126,000 acres and 11% containment, and I will point out that that was updated this morning, so that's likely jumped up since they updated this morning, because we have had a large amount of activity throughout the day, and yeah, it doesn't look like they've updated that again yet. And then when it comes to the Mcfarland Fire, the Monument Fire, the River Complex, the Antelope Fire, we'll just quickly look at all those numbers. Monument is up to 150,000 acres. Key thing we're going to be looking at there is how close it's getting into Hayfork. And then the French Fire, that's another big one we're going to be looking at. Some structure defense going on there right now. 20,000 acres as of 9 hours ago, so we're likely going to see that jump up next time they update this, because we have seen some activity on the French Fire throughout the day today. And then when it comes to the River Complex, that one is at 88,000 acres, and Mcfarland Fire is at 120,000 acres, but the good news there is that one is at 73% containment, so that's at least trending in the right direction in that department. And then the Antelope Fire, around 70,000 acres and 40% containment. Good news on that one is it's not as near a large amount of structures as some of the other fires that we have going on. So last thing I'll say before we dive into the Caldor Fire, I think that's the big priority that we're going to be talking about right now, but just in case you're new to the live stream, I do want to point out that the South Fire is in a developing situation going on right now throughout Southern California at San Bernardino County. You can see that smoke plume coming off. You can see where some of that retardant is being dropped throughout the last couple of hours, and that is leading to some new evacuation orders as of right now. So if you do live in that area, be sure to stay updated with your local resources on what exactly is going on there. And just one second, I want to adjust my other screen. Okay, so throughout this next maybe 30 minutes, it might take that long, might take even longer, I do just want to try to get out all the information that I can about the Caldor Fire, Dixie Fire, the other fires going on in California. So I won't be looking at the chat as much over the next maybe 30 minutes, because I just want to try to get all that information out in as concise a manner as I possibly can. But then we're going to try to make this more interactive, and we'll follow some of the various fires that are going on as of right now. So when it comes to the Caldor Fire, this is always a good map to look at first because you can see where those hotspots were yesterday, and you can see why this is the fire I'm talking about first. There's a number of different factors to focus on when it comes to it. One, you can just see how active this fire was over the last couple of days. One second. You can see just how active this fire was over the last couple of days. Not sure what's going on with my other screen. Sorry. I just flipped it over and turned it off, so that won't be distracting me anymore. So with the Caldor Fire, number of key things to look at. One, first thing you might notice is where you see those red dots, that's where your hotspots are. Where that yellow shading is, that's the current fire perimeter. And big worry that you might have is those hotspots that are on the western edge here that look like they're going directly into where we see all those structures, which are represented with those orange dots that I'm flashing on and off right there. But one thing I will say is I believe that they've been talking about firing operations on this western side for a number of days, and I believe they were running some of those firing operations earlier this morning on this western edge. So you can sometimes take those hotspots with a grain of salt because we don't actually know if that's actually wildfire going on or if it's firing operations. If I had to just say my opinion, and you can always take that with a grain of salt as well, but I would actually guess that these hotspots we see on the western edge here are actually those firing operations, because I listened to the Caldor Fire report and it sounded like they were feeling at least a little more confident on this western edge, had some good firing operations going on down here, had some good containment lines going on, some dozers, some structure protection, all kinds of stuff on that western edge where they were feeling more confident than before. Now, where the big challenges come in on the Caldor Fire is on the northern, northeastern, and eastern side of this fire, where you can see that's where a lot of the real fire behavior was taking place. One key thing that happened over the last couple of days was that spot fire that was able to jump Highway 50. I do know that about 2,100 acres are now associated with that spot fire, and it's 2,100 acres that have crossed Highway 50 as of this point. Really, number of reasons that's a key area where we're seeing a lot of fire behavior. You can see on this map that it's not flat terrain. You get some rugged terrain here. We have a lot of critically dry fuels. We're getting those southwesterly winds in the afternoon. So lots of different factors coming together to lead to a lot of activity on that northern edge and the edge that has jumped Highway 50. Now, one thing I will say, moving forward, so what's been pushing this northeastern section of the Caldor Fire so much over the last couple of days is the southwesterly winds that pick up in the afternoon and just either push the fire forward just directly, or it does lead to those spot fires as well. Now, the good news there is over the next couple of days, it looks like our winds are going to be calmer. So they should have some potential to maybe get a better handle on this northeastern edge, which would be great news, and I know is the top priority because you can see the large amount of structures that are up here as you get into areas like Strawberry and then down all the way to South Lake Tahoe, where all those orange flashing dots right there, that's where we have all the structures. So that, I think, is the key area, and maybe it's hard to say because we have so many new fires popping up that I haven't really been able to fully research yet, but as of right now, I would say this is the top area I'm watching in California. Over the next couple of days, they're hopefully going to be able to conduct some firing operations on this northern edge. They were talking about the fact that they are working on some containment lines up here, tie it in with a road to be able to create what they call a catcher's mitt to stop this fire in its tracks. So hopefully that will be the case, because what they were saying in their update is if it were to cross those containment lines, it's much more difficult features and factors to try to stop it after that. So the good news is There is going to be some reduced winds over the next couple of days, so I would say conditions will be trending in the right direction when it comes to trying to stop that northeastern edge, because we've seen how fast it's been pushing with those southwesterly winds the last couple of days. But once I get to the fire weather forecast, you'll see that come Monday and Tuesday, we are really going to be hoping that they've got some good control over this northeastern section, because it looks like we might have some extreme wind gusts coming in Monday and Tuesday that I'll show in just a second. But first, I do want to show what the Caldor Fire actually looked like throughout the day today. Well, you can see it doesn't want to show which camera we're looking at, so we'll just make this big screen. This is looking at the Caldor Fire throughout the day today, and you can see why this is the fire that we're focusing on first. This is the fire where we had the most activity today, the most smoke coming off. You probably know that if you live in Lake Tahoe right now, based on your air quality, but certainly a lot of activity. It does look like we did have some aircraft, so that's an improvement on some of the other days that we've had on the Caldor Fire where it's so smoky they have to ground the aircraft. But I do know this is one of the top priorities in the state, as they do not want that northeastern section to push any farther forward. So that basically sums up the Caldor Fire, saying what's going on throughout the day today. Lots of activity, and the key area we're watching is that northeastern section. Now, when it comes to the numbers for the Caldor Fire, we are up to 126,000 acres, but that was last updated at 7 a.m. this morning, so once that gets updated again, we're likely to see that jump up, because we did have some new activity, some new growth on that northeastern section, and that we actually had another spot fire as well that grew to a couple hundred acres throughout the day today. And then probably should have done this first, but turning on the live hotspots. Now again, I think we can take those hotspots on the west here with a grain of salt, because I think that's still picking up some of the smoke and heat from the firing operations earlier this morning. But as always, never take my word for it. Always stay updated with your local resources to see if there's any new evacuation orders popping up. I can't possibly stay updated with absolutely everything, especially when there's like 8 major wildfires going on in California. So right there, I would guess that's still heat from the firing operations, but always trust local authorities over me. So again, where I'm mostly concerned is this northeastern section of the fire. So this is better at showing what cities we're actually looking at, and the highway systems as well. So there's Highway 50. You can see where that spot fire happened on the Caldor Fire. Like I said, overall we have about 2,100 acres that have crossed Highway 50. We had another little spot fire again today that was able to grow, but they were talking about doing some firing operations on the eastern side of this to try to remove some of the fuels so it can't move any farther to the east. But then when it comes to some of these, I'm looking for that road that they were talking about that they were trying to use as a containment line, but I'm not seeing any road right around here. That's where it sounded like they were trying to create some containment on this northern edge. But in that last update, they were saying that the current hotspots were right up against where they had containment. So that wasn't all too long ago that I watched that update, but what we're going to be hoping over the next couple of hours is that that fire doesn't cross those containment lines or spot over it, because as they were saying in their update, it's going to be much more difficult to stop as you move farther towards the northeast. Now, one thing I will point out though is that these hotspots on the very northern edge of the Caldor Fire look like they're about to move into much steeper, higher elevation terrain and what looks like a lot of granite and not that much fuel. So my prediction for the next 24 hours is that these hotspots right here actually slow down, if not stop, as they get to this more granite type terrain where there's not as much fuel. This is something that, what fire was it? I think it was the Creek Fire last year where we saw this, where it was burning through fuels like crazy, thousands of acres a day, And then right when it got to the higher elevations where it was more granite, the fire basically stopped in its tracks. So I'm thinking that's what's going to happen on this northern section right here, as it works into that higher elevation in granite, hoping that hotspot stops right there, which would protect us from that fire coming around from the west to Lake Tahoe. But I think where the big concern is right here. You can see kind of how that terrain looks. It looks like we have a drainage or a canyon right there, which means that winds will typically get funneled through that, which means that your fire growth is going to be faster through that area. How I always think of that is if you have a hose and there's water coming out of it, and then you put your thumb over the hose, so maybe just half of the circle is covered, then the water comes out a lot faster. So the same thing happens when you funnel winds into a canyon. It's almost like you're pinching those winds, and then that has the ability to push your fire faster forward, and then unfortunately also has the ability to lead to spot fires. But like I said, over the next couple of days, winds are working in our favor on this northeastern section. Should be calmer than the last couple of days, which should lead to some reduced fire spread. But as of right now, you can see why I am so concerned about this northeastern section. You can see those structures right there. Let's see if the city pops up on this map. So, not even going to try to pronounce that. I can almost guarantee I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Science Creek? Science Camp? Science Camp? You'll have to try to phonetically spell that in the live chat. Not looking at the live chat right now because I'm just trying to get the information out there, but when I scroll through it later, I'll be sure to see if anybody can tell me how to pronounce that. But after that, then you can see we have Twin Bridges, Phillips, Nebelhorn, Myers, then Fallen Leaf, and then you're in South Lake Tahoe. So I think that is the key area that we're going to be watching, because I think it's going to slow down as it gets into this granite up here. But you can see that through this stretch, we do still have a large amount of fuel, and unfortunately, the fuel in that area is critically dry. And based on this heat signature map, it does look like the fire is based on where the perimeter was yesterday. So, not sure. There it is yesterday. Then if we look at the live hotspots, so try to keep an eye on where that fire extended to. Then we go to the live hotspots. Extends up to there. So if we want to measure that, it looks like it's moved about maybe 2 to 3 miles throughout the last 24 hours on that northeastern section, even more on that northern section. And it does look like it has passed over some of these structures, but that's where I always say the big disclaimer on these videos is these hotspots are being picked up by a satellite in space. You can see the thick smoke that satellite is trying to break through to pick up where those hotspots are. So you can always take these with a grain of salt, because we've seen in the past that sometimes these hotspots will show up somewhere where the fire isn't actually yet. So I'm hoping that it hasn't moved this far to the northeast where it's over these structures, but that is going to be something we watch very closely over, actually throughout the entire course of this live stream. We'll be sure to keep a very close eye on that. So that's the Dixie Fire camera. I just want to make sure we got the numbers down for the Caldor Fire. I think I went off on quite a tangent there, but Caldor Fire, 126,000 acres as of 7 a.m. and unfortunately still only 11% containment. If we want to see where that containment is, you can see it's on that southern edge, and the good news is it looks like we're picking up some containment on that western edge as well. The reason that's such good news is you can see that western edge is where we have just thousands of structures over here. So what I know Cal Fire is planning, and what I'm hoping over the next maybe 24 to 48 hours, when we have those calmer winds and it's going to be more favorable conditions with those calmer winds, unlike today where that smoke is just flying off into Lake Tahoe, we might get one of those situations where the smoke actually just settles down over the fire. Oh, I just realized you can actually see where the burn scar is there if you look really closely. But with the calmer winds, instead of the smoke just being pushed out into Tahoe, it might have the effect of just sitting over the Caldor Fire, which can significantly reduce fire behavior. We've seen this in the past. We've seen it on the Caldor Fire and the Dixie Fire a number of times, where when the winds calm down, the smoke settles down over the fire, and then if your temperature forecast is for 95 degrees, it ends up only being 72. If your winds are for 25 miles per hour, it ends up only being 10. And that's what I'm hoping for over the next couple of days, for those winds to calm down, the smoke to settle over the fire, and then reduce our fire behavior by reducing our temperatures, hopefully increasing our relative humidity with those decreased temperatures, and then the winds, no matter what, look like they will be calming down. So good news there, and hopefully they'll be able to pick up even more containment on this western edge. And then again, the big question mark though is on this northeastern section, because they were saying that where they have those containment lines right now, I wonder if they have another map that actually shows where they're trying to get containment. Because I do want to try to point out, this might have some X's on it. That's what we're looking for. Because what I want to see is where this fire is compared to where they have those containment lines on the northeastern section, because in their update they said it was pushing right up against it, which is not exactly what you'd want here. So doesn't I think, yeah, so where you see those X's right there, that's where they have those containment lines. You can actually see it in there if you look really closely where my cursor is. So that tells you how much it moved throughout the day today. Is in their update not too long ago, they said that the fire perimeter had moved right up against those containment lines. So the big thing that we're going to be watching moving forward is, and crossing our fingers for, is that that fire no longer moves to the northeast. It stops at that containment line. That's going to be the big question mark, because they said after that it's going to be much harder to stop it. So that's the big thing we're going to be following on the Caldor Fire over the next couple of days. Can that northeastern section stay contained? And can the fire calm down enough over the next couple of days that when those erratic gusty winds come in on Monday and Tuesday, that it's calm enough that it won't just jump over those containment lines? Again, that I think is the big place to watch. But as always with the Caldor Fire and all of our wildfires, I'm really diving into this one right now because I think this is the top priority, I think, in my opinion, although it's hard to say because we have some new fires popping up that are leading to some new evacuation orders. When it comes to all these fires, I try to put as many links as I can in the description for the various evacuation orders that might be in place. If nothing else, go to CalFire or insaweb.com, and they usually have lots of links to local resources as well if you're wondering where the most recent evacuation orders are. Now, with the Caldor Fire, I did find this map. This is new to me, and it shows where the mandatory evacuation warnings are, and the evacuation, evacuation orders are the red here. That's mandatory. Evacuation warnings are the yellow. That's where they're suggesting that you get ready to leave, because they're expecting that to be an area where the fire could push in the future. So you can see where we have those mandatory evacuation orders, and key thing that I'm looking at here is that they're already extending those evacuation warnings into the South Lake Tahoe and actually southwest Lake Tahoe area as of right now. So this is going to be a good map to keep your eye on. I did put the link for this one in the description below, and always good to stay updated with that kind of information. Now, I know I've said maybe some not encouraging information, especially considering how sketchy this northeastern section of the fire could get over the next couple of days, but right now I think is when we can get into some of the good news on the Caldor Fire, because fire weather forecast, which we'll look at in a second, I think is looking much better over the next couple of days than the last couple of days and certainly last week. And the other good news is that we still have a large number of personnel in this. Actually picked up even more personnel. We have 18 helicopters. You could see in that live imagery throughout the day today when we were looking at it. I'll just pull it right back up here. We can actually, if you look closely, you can actually see one of those helicopters in action. You can also just see how active the Caldor Fire was today. That's why we're spending so much time on it at the beginning of this video. Right there, you can see that helicopter pop through. And just in case you missed it, I'll show it one more time. It's going to be right in the middle of the screen, right about there. Might have been able to see it. So we have 18 helicopters, 243 engines, 51 dozers, 27 water tenders. We're now up to 2,667 personnel, so up about 600 since the last time we looked at it, and 74 crews. And then I think the one thing that I do have to mention, I haven't found a map for this yet, but I will keep my eye out for it, is that we are at 637 structures destroyed on the Caldor Fire. And to see where that is, because I haven't actually found a damage assessment map for the Caldor Fire yet, you can see where that fire perimeter is, and then where those orange dots are. That shows the structures. So I think most of those structures that have been destroyed are in the Grizzly Flats area. I saw a number of videos coming out of there where you could see how the fire just swept through there and led to an unfortunately large amount of structures destroyed. So as always, thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected by this wildfire. But again, there is some good news. We now have 2,600 personnel in this fire. And when we're looking at the fire weather forecast, conditions should start to work in their favor over the next couple of days. So as we move forward into, let's see, today is Wednesday. So as we look forward into Thursday, this is when it's going to start pushing in. You see it's this ridge pattern right here. So that's a much more typical summer pattern for California. That means you're most likely going to have warm, dry air, which right off the bat, you might think that's very bad for wildfires and it's going to lead to an increase in fire behavior, which there is the potential for, but I'll try not to get too sciencey here, but if you look at those lines, that's the isobars, the lines of constant pressure. When you're in wildfire season, you want to see those lines very far apart, like we're going to be seeing on Thursday and into Friday. You can see how far apart those lines are. When those lines are very close together, that's when you get extreme winds. So on the flip side, when those lines are very far apart, like they're going to be Thursday, Friday, into Saturday as well, that's where you have very weak winds. And I think that's where the good news comes in for the fire, is because, in my opinion, wind is the most important factor when it comes to fire spread. Maybe how dry the fuels are as well. But it's going to be very helpful and significant to see these winds calming down throughout the next couple of days as that high pressure system slowly moves in Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So just looking at the conditions for tomorrow, or first let's look at what they were for today so we can get a little perspective. Today we had temperatures, maybe that's in the very higher elevations. Down on the western edge of the fire, you can see about 80 degrees. Humidity was, and I actually clicked this spot on purpose. It's the strawberry area that I want to really focus on the forecast here. The fire hasn't gotten to strawberry, but you want to look ahead of where the fire is, because the predominant wind direction is going to be from the southwest. So you want to pick a point up here so that you can take into account those winds that are going to have the possibility of taking burning embers and pushing them up to the northeast. So when it comes to strawberry today, it was relatively cool temperature-wise, just in the 60s. Relative humidity 20%, so on the dry side. But the thing that's led to all that growth on the northeastern section of the fire, and especially looking at the live imagery, you get an idea for this, is when you look at the wind gusts. The wind gusts throughout the day today were over 30 miles per hour. I looked at a couple observations where I was seeing 35 miles per hour, and that's the reason that northeastern section of the fire has been the area of the fire that's been growing the most. You can see how as you move farther up to the northeast of the fire, that's where the fire gets more and more active, and it's because of those southwesterly winds. Now, here is where some of the good news comes in. If we look at tomorrow, the winds significantly calm down. I know 20 to 25 miles per hour still seems significant, but that is much better than 35 miles per hour. But we should see temperature coming up a little bit. Looks like we're out of the 60s into the 70s on the western edge of the fire. We might even be in the mid 80s, and then likely to get drier as well. Relative humidity back into the teens. So it's going to be drier and hotter, but the big thing is the winds are going to be calming down, so that should slow some of that spread to the northeast. Now, one thing I do want to point out here is that you might be concerned that it's going to be getting that much hotter and drier throughout the day tomorrow, but the other reason calmer winds are such a good factor to have on a wildfire is, as I was saying before, instead of all that smoke blowing right off into Lake Tahoe, with those calmer winds, it might just settle down over the fire like we did see that one day. I forget exactly what day it was, but the smoke might settle down directly over the fire, and then our temperatures might be 10 to 20 degrees cooler than this forecast is actually showing, because the sunlight isn't going to be able to break through that smoke that is just sitting over the fire. You can see that that certainly wasn't the case today, as we did have those, seeing if this will play, you can see it wasn't the case today, as we had those strong winds just pushing that smoke out of the region. Not only brings some burning embers in that smoke plume where it's able to drop into the fuels and start a new fire with a 90% ignition rate, but it also clears the skies so more heat is able to come in, dries out the fuels even more, and leads to more fire activity. So what we're hoping to see over the next couple of days, I know this might be not what you want to see if you're worried about air quality or the ability to use aircraft, but we would actually want to see this just completely settle down, all that smoke right there, to the point where we can't really even see anything in this camera, because that won't let as much heat in, and then that'll keep our temperatures cooler and our winds calmer as well. So going through the next few days, that looks to be the case where we have those calmer winds, as, like I said, that high pressure system is just developing over California. Warmer, drier conditions, but weaker winds. And then the key thing that we have to keep our eye on is, as we get into Monday, you start to see this little trough move into California. And then remember what I was saying earlier about how when you get those isobars closer together, the lines of constant pressure, when you get those lines closer together, that's when the winds start to pick up. You can see how far apart they are, especially over the Caldor Fire as we get into Saturday. Very far apart, that's weak winds. As you get into Monday, you can see those lines get a lot closer together, which means your winds are going to be stronger, and you can see, unfortunately, they're expected to be coming from the southwest. Now again, the reason that's the big concern is because you can see how many structures we have up here, and with strong southwesterly winds, that could lead to some dangerous situations where the fire, as of right now, is already pushing up against where we have that containment line in place. So if we want to actually look at the forecast winds for Monday, one thing I will say is I sometimes have the rule where I don't trust a weather forecast more than 3 days out. I found with winds it's usually pretty accurate, but we'll have to keep an eye on this to see if it changes. But as of right now, let's see if it comes in Sunday at all first. Sunday, it looks like we start to transition to slightly gustier winds. We're out of the 20s into the low 30s, but then the real strong winds start to come in Monday afternoon, where there is the possibility of, one sec, I'm going to move my chair, stand up. There is the possibility, as you can see, of some 40 mile per hour winds, and the key danger there is that it's coming from the southwest. And then I'm trying to just piece together all the different puzzle pieces that we've been talking about. So zooming in, you can see where their containment lines are right here. As of right now, they said that the fire perimeter already is up to where you see those X's right there. I think they're going to be able to, I probably shouldn't say this yet, but what I'm hoping is that with the calmer winds over the next couple of days, they'll continue to be able to keep it within that containment line right there, keep it out of all these structures that we see to the northeast. But the big concern is as we get into Monday and Tuesday, we're basically going to need that northeastern side of the fire calm down, because we're going to have very gusty winds. And when you get winds up to 40, which means in some of your drainages and canyons, it might be around 50 miles per hour, that can lead to some rapid rate of spread and the possibility of spot fires as well, where it could jump containment lines. So that is the reason right there that we've spent so much time talking about the Caldor Fire already. It's because that, I think, is the big thing we're going to be watching as we get into Monday and Tuesday of next week. Or the big thing we're going to be watching first is how much they can reduce that fire behavior over the next couple of days with the more favorable conditions. So with all that being said, I am going to show the Wildfire Wildfire Simulation Model. We run this out of San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory. It combines the fire perimeter, the hotspots, with the fuel, weather, topography variables. It also calculates how the wildfire is actually going to create its own weather, and then how that weather is then going to affect the fire. But the key thing I will point out here is that it is an experimental forecast only, and it doesn't take into account the fire suppression tactics, because those change sometimes on minute-to-minute basis. They're changing what they're doing, so can't really put that into a simulation that you run once a day. So that's the big disclaimer, because you're going to see a large amount of growth as I show this, but it's not taking into account the fire suppression tactics. So what you're about to see is much more growth than I'm actually expecting, but I do like to show this because it shows how where you have the winds and what direction the winds are coming from is where you see the largest amount of growth. So just clicking play here, you can see expecting more growth on that northern side. If we just zoom in up there, you can see that it has those winds from the southwest, and that continues to push the fire farther and farther to the northeast. You can see where that spot fire has jumped Highway 50, and then where the winds and the fire line up, that's where you get the majority of the spread. So that's not what we want to see right there. You can see where Strawberry is right there. I don't think we're actually going to be seeing this much growth as long as that containment line that they're talking about is able to hold. And I think we're going to get some of that smoke sitting over the fire that keeps our conditions cooler and our fire behavior down over the next 2 days. So I almost want to click away here, because you can see that at that point it shows the fire moving into Strawberry. But I think over the next couple of days, with all the resources we're seeing coming onto this fire, actually it's going to depend on one major thing. If we end up getting that smoke inversion over the fire, it's going to significantly calm things down. And if that happens, this fire could start trending in the right direction really fast, which is what I'm hoping for. But just based on that imagery, you can see why I am so focused on the Caldor Fire right now. But just going back, one other place where I think the model is overestimating is on this western edge. It sounds like they've been doing a lot of good work on this western edge. They have some containment right there. They've had some firing operations in place here, some structure protection here. And I know that's one of the top priorities, because that is where we have so many structures here. So I think the model's over-predicting growth on that western edge right there. But I also think it's just over-predicting in general, because I think we're going to get that smoke layer over us over the next couple days to keep our conditions down. But this kind of paints the picture of why we are going to be keeping such a close eye on it. So that I think wraps up the Caldor Fire. Big thing that I mentioned is that is the fire that had the most activity throughout the day today. We had lots of smoke going into Lake Tahoe, and the area of the fire that is the most active is clearly that northeastern section, and we're going to have to keep a very close eye on this because just in the course of me talking about it, it looks like another one of those hotspot boxes has popped up, and it is showing that it's over some of these structures in the area, but I don't want to confirm that yet because I can't confirm that because we've seen in the past that this heat signature map isn't always spot on, but that is the area we're going to be watching the closest over the next couple of days, hoping that the winds calm down enough, that the fire calms down, we get a thick smoke layer, and they're able to get some good containment on that northeastern section before those strong southwesterly winds come in Monday, and we didn't look at Tuesday yet, but Tuesday it looks like they're going to be even stronger. So that's the big thing we're going to be watching over the next week when it comes to wildfire in California. Now, we are going to talk about the Dixie Fire next, but I do just want to take a quick peek at the live chat to make sure that my sound is still on and everything is working well. I've done a live stream before where I actually live streamed for about 40 minutes and then I realized my sound wasn't on the entire time. So that is why I try to keep an eye on the live chat every once in a while. So, yeah, Lucy said, not fond of those projection maps, especially on that Caldor Fire. When I show the projection map for the Dixie Fire, then you might be fond because it's showing not that much activity on the Dixie Fire over the next couple of days. So I think we will transition up to the Dixie Fire now. I'll just take a quick sip of water first. Alrighty, so transitioning up to the Dixie Fire, you can see that you'd almost think this was two different fires because they're so far apart at this point, but that is actually the two parts of the Dixie Fire where we are still seeing the most activity. It's that southeastern edge and that northwestern edge there, and especially that northwestern edge where we see that large pyrocumulus coming off of it today. I always like looking at this too. It actually shows where those hot spots are. Usually it takes a second to load. You'll be able to see that on the Caldor Fire as well, where we have those current hot spots and where we had all that growth. I think that flare up on the western side of the Caldor Fire that you see at the beginning of this loop, right there, I think that was actually their firing operation this morning. But then you can see that this northeastern section, that's why we were talking so much about that. You can see how actively it's still burning at this point. Now, when it comes to the Dixie Fire, you can actually see where the burn scar is on this map, and then you can see those two spots on the Dixie Fire that have been the most active throughout the day today. If we look at that, just looking at the fire perimeter, you can see where the most activity has been over the last couple of days. It's been on that northwestern section there and that southeastern section there. And if we look at the current hotspots, it tells the same story. Most of that activity going on the north and the southeast. So I believe I actually have some cameras up for the Dixie Fire. So this is the Indian Ridge cam. You can see which direction it's pointed. Looks like it's almost pointed over Taylorsville, but I don't believe the last update I could find said that the fire wasn't into Taylorsville, but they did have some amazing strategy going on there, which I'll show in a second, some of the stuff that they're doing in Taylorsville. But you can see that we're looking at that southeastern hotspot of the Dixie Fire right here, where we did see a fair bit of activity today. Couple little spots right here where you see that pyrocumulus, where you get that white puffy cloud on top of the smoke plume. That's where you know that there's a lot of heat being generated, a lot of winds coming in here. And the other thing that I notice on this map is how critically dry some of the fuels are in this area. It almost looks like that there are trees that had retardant dropped on them, like we were seeing in the Tamarack fire a few weeks ago. But I believe that's just dead trees right there. Either, I'd love to know if it's because of the bark beetles, or if it's somebody in the live chat a couple weeks ago said that there is some fungus in this area that also killed a large amount of trees, but paints a picture for why the Dixie Fire at this point has burned 750,000 acres. We've had some very challenging conditions when it comes to temperatures and winds, but we also have a lot of critically dry fuels, and the Fire Weather Research Lab at San Jose State is actually showing the driest fuels that we've ever recorded. So gives a good idea for why we've seen as much activity on the Dixie Fire as we have. So here's another image of that same smoke plume. This time we're more to the south and looking up at it. And I'll make it big here. And then you'll be able to see the smoke plume throughout the day today. Calmer conditions in the morning, but then in the afternoon, your temperatures pick up, your winds pick up. You can actually see that the winds were a little bit gusty based on how much those trees are moving. And then right there is where you start to see a couple of those pyrocumulus clouds popping up. Not the craziest day that we've seen on the Dixie Fire, but certainly still some activity going on. So that is why we do continue to look at it. Going back to this map right here, few things I'll point out. One is the last time I checked Twitter, there was a new evacuation order for the Dixie Fire, which I was actually surprised to see. That's the other thing. We'll try to talk about the South Fire in a second, but lots of other things to talk about first. On the Dixie Fire, I believe there was a new evacuation order at some point today, and can't find it right there. But as always, if you are living anywhere near the Dixie Fire, always try to stay updated with those most recent evacuation orders. Actually, I wonder if it pops up on this map right here. So I don't exactly remember what this looked like yesterday, but about an hour or two ago on Twitter, I did see a new evacuation order being put in place. I'll try to see if I can find that later in the video after I try to just get out some of the most important information. So clearly where we have the most activity is on that northwestern section there, but you notice that there's not as many structures around that area. And based on what direction that smoke was going throughout the day today, you can see that the winds were blowing mostly from the southwest, which is pretty typical for the Dixie Fire. That's something we've seen over and over again, where the winds shift to the southwest in the afternoon, and then you get that growth to the northeast, which is exactly what we're seeing up there. Now, where there's the ongoing concern is where we have this hotspot right around where we do have a large amount of structures. So right there, instead of me trying to relay what I read from Cal Fire, I'll just try to see if I can find it right there. So there it is. So what we're concerned about is Taylorsville right there. You can see all those hot spots. And looking on right here, an extensive plumbing operation was carried out in Taylorsville, and the hose lines and water have now been run to every house in the community. So sounds like they have a large number of resources in this area working as hard as they can to, I imagine, get some dozer lines, get some containment lines, and apparently have water run to every house in the community, which is great news there as well. So that will continue to be the area of the Dixie Fire that we do watch the closest over the next couple of days, just based on its proximity to a large number of structures. But there is also some good news on the Dixie Fire. You can remember it was about a week ago that we were very worried about the northern shore of Lake Almanor, as there was hotspots being pushed closer and closer to these structures by some northerly winds, just based on the fact that we don't see those hotspots. And when you look at the evacuation map, that is an area that doesn't even have an evacuation warning anymore. So that's some great news there. It says normal, no current knowledge of active public safety incidents affecting your area. So that is some great news on the Dixie Fire. The other good news, I would say, is in the Westwood area as well. About a week ago when we were looking at, we had hotspots to the west, we had hotspots to the northeast that were being pushed down closer and closer to Westwood with those northerly winds. But as you can see, both of those areas appear to not be throwing off any heat anymore. And if you look at the satellite imagery, you can actually see that. Not seeing those giant smoke plumes that we were seeing around Lake Almanor and Westwood at around this time last week. So that's some good news there. It's also good news to see that that finger isn't extending closer up to Susanville anymore. And then that hotspot or that spot fire that did work its way into Janesville appears to have calmed down significantly over the last few days. There was one point where it was moving into Janesville. We did get some structures destroyed in that area, but Cal Fire did some amazing work to keep it from going through the whole area. And then when those northerly winds came in, we were very concerned about the Milford area. But you can see that looks like Cal Fire was able to do some great work to keep it out of the structures on the southwestern shore of Honey Lake as well. So that's where some of the good news comes in. Where I'd say there is still some concern is where we have those hotspots around where you see those structures right there, and that is where those live hotspots are as well. So I think that is the key spot that we're going to be watching on the Dixie Fire moving forward. So when it comes to the Dixie Fire, let's try to update it again, see if it's updated since 8 a.m. this morning. Oh, it did. So it got updated at 7:15 p.m. It is now up to 742,000 acres. And 45% containment. I think I have the containment map up right here. So where you see that red line is where it's uncontained. Where you see the black line is where it is contained. So key areas that I love to see that containment around Chester. That's good to see right there. Still seeing uncontained on the north shore of Lake Almanor, but I imagine that's going to be one of those lines that turns black in the next couple of days. Good to see that we're contained on the western area of Westwood. I imagine we'll see that eastern area get contained over the next couple of days as well. And then also good to see that we're starting to see some black line around that spot fire that worked its way into Janesville. It was right here that it was pushing down this ridge and where it was able to destroy some structures in this area. So it's good to see that they're feeling confident in that area as of right now. Then you can also see majority of Taylorsville is surrounded by that black line right there, but the big concern moving forward is right there where we are still uncontained and where we still have those active hotspots. That's, again, the key spot that we're watching, not only because of the hotspots and the structures, but that's also the area of the fire where we aren't contained yet. Then on the southern edge, that's where we're looking absolutely great on the Dixie Fire, all the way from Greenville all the way up to almost west of Chester here. That black line goes all the way around the southern edge of the Dixie Fire, seeing lots of containment right there. So when it comes to, again, those evacuation orders and warnings, it does look like the areas around Janesville have been lifted from that order, which is mandatory, to just a warning, which is, I forget the exact words they use. I think this map showed it. Warning. You can't really click on it. Yeah, I think warning is basically just where you want to start being alert and be ready to leave at a moment's notice. But again, I love to see that even those warnings being lifted around Lake Almanor, and we will have to try to keep an eye on this, because I'll look for that tweet in a second, but I swear I saw a new evacuation order being put in place over the Dixie Fire. Actually, I know one other place where we might be able to find it. If we go to some of the Cal Fire, Dixie Fire pages, they're usually pretty good about posting when there's new evacuation orders. So we missed that update, but I will try to maybe watch that at some point. And not seeing any new orders there. What about Plumas County? I believe it was on the west, if I remember right, it was on the western area that we were seeing it. And, so I'll look for that tweet again later, but not finding it right now. So, again, when it comes to the Dixie Fire, key thing that we're going to have to look at is how it changes over the next couple of days with those. Actually, sorry about that. I didn't finish showing the numbers. So, up to 750,000 acres, 45% contained. I got carried away trying to look for the newest evacuation order, which I swear I saw pop up. And then this is where some of the bad news comes in. We are up to 1,273 structures destroyed. Haven't seen that come up all that much in recent days, but we are going to have to keep a close eye on that, as it does look like those hotspots are over some structures right now. Again, you can sometimes take those hotspots with a grain of salt, but we will keep an eye on if any damage assessment teams come back from those areas with new information. Now, where I would say good news comes in is we still have a very large amount of resources on this fire. 19 helicopters, 488 engines, 176 dozers, 179 water tenders, 5,470 personnel, and 88 crews. Now, you notice that personnel number is down, but I wouldn't say that's too much of a surprise when we look across California. We have Caldor Fire, which picked up about 600 personnel, might be from the Dixie Fire because of that critical nature of that northeastern section. We also have the Monument Fire, the Mcfarland Fire, the River Complex, the Antelope Fire, and then the French Fire and a number of other new ones popping up. So you might actually view it as good news that the Dixie Fire lost some personnel. That might mean that they're seeing it as a less critical threat than in previous days. But when we think about what the threat will be over the next few days, that's where we really have to look at the fire weather forecast. And similar to the Caldor Fire, we have that big ridge coming in over all of California that's going to be bringing warmer, drier conditions, but it should bring a reduction in winds as well. There's the winds that you see coming in Monday and Tuesday for the Caldor Fire. That's going to be the big story that we're following over the next few days. You can subscribe to this channel to stay updated with that, because that's going to be a top story that we watch over the next couple of days. But let's see exactly where we want to pick our point. I think let's try to find where those hotspots are right now. So it looks like it's about southeast of Lake Almanor. So let's try to pick our point southeast of there as well. Right about there. So again, it does look like those gusty winds are going to be coming into the Dixie area on Monday and Tuesday as well. But first, let's just look at tomorrow. And that is where the good news comes in. Just like on the Caldor Fire, when that high pressure system comes in, it does bring some warmer, drier conditions, but it also brings much weaker winds, which I think is going to have a very favorable impact on all of our fires over the next couple of days. Where the winds drop, that means the smoke might be able to settle over the fire, which can actually reduce your temperatures, which then reduces your winds even more. So looks like still blowing at about 20 to 25 miles per hour tomorrow afternoon, but curious to see what it was today, in the 30s. So should have less activity on the Dixie Fire tomorrow with those weaker winds. Not even going to show the temperature, because if we get the smoke, actually I'll show the temperature. It's showing with that high moving in, getting up into the low 80s, but if we get that smoke inversion over us, it might end up just being around 70. Then if we look at Friday's forecast, you can see temperatures continue to rise. We're into the high 80s, but the winds remain, or actually get even weaker as that high continues to build in. So right there, might get that smoke settling over and have that temperature of 87 degrees actually end up being 70 degrees if that sunlight can't punch through the smoke that's able to sit over the fire because the winds are so weak. Now, just like the Caldor Fire, once we're going to have that high pressure system over us Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then as we get into Monday, you start to see this trough build in right here. And then you see those isobars, the lines of constant pressure, get a lot closer together, which is not what you want to see during wildfire season, because that means there's going to be some strong winds coming in. And if we look at Monday, you can see that's exactly what the case is, showing 38 mile per hour winds on Monday afternoon. If we look at Tuesday, it picked up even more on the Caldor Fire. Let's see if it does the same for the Dixie Fire. Looks like similar winds to Monday, still around 35 to 40 miles per hour. Most likely will, if this does end up coming true in the forecast, there's a good chance we'll be seeing some red flag warnings towards the start of next week. But again, that's where we really hope that over the next few days, where we have those weaker winds, they're able to make some great progress so that the fire activity is calmed down by the time this wind event does come in. So I think that's the big story that we're going to be following on the Dixie Fire over the next couple of days. I am going to show the Wharf S-Fire model, because I know I accidentally just clicked on the Caldor Fire model, which I think overestimated the growth that we're going to be seeing over the next couple of days. I certainly don't think we're going to see that much growth on the Caldor Fire. I think we are going to get that smoke inversion over us, but just so you see that the model doesn't always predict disaster and catastrophe. If we look at the next 2 days on the Dixie Fire, you can see it's all the way into, actually that is the forecast for today, so it actually did a really good job of predicting where that fire activity was going to be today. You can see where you see those colors coming in on the northern edge and this southeastern edge. That's exactly where we did see activity today. And then now we're getting into the forecast for tomorrow. At about 5 in the morning, we have those down canyon winds. And then you can see fairly strong down canyon winds right there. And then right when you get to about 12 o'clock every day, those winds shift around to a more southwesterly direction. But the good news is tomorrow, the winds are going to be calmer than they were today. Still predicting some growth on that southeastern section there, and the northern section as well. Again, sometimes it's helpful just to zoom back and forth really fast. So still predicting some growth in that northern and southeastern, but not nearly as much as the model was predicting for the Caldor Fire. So just going forward here, we'll zoom in on this area of the fire, because I think this is my big concern. Moving forward, it looks like the winds are mostly from maybe a westerly or almost northerly direction on this side of the fire, and that's actually good news if you think about Taylorsville, because that would be pushing the fire away from that area. But with that being said, we do also have some structures in that area, so we are going to have to keep an eye on that moving forward. Now, going to take a brief pause. So just to sum up the Dixie Fire, in areas like Lake Almanor, Susanville, Janesville, we're looking much better than this time last week. But we are still seeing a large amount of activity on that northwestern section and that southeastern section. I think the southeastern section is going to be the spot that we're watching the closest over the next couple of days. As you can see, that is the area of the Dixie Fire where those hotspots are near a large amount of structures. Now, another fire where the hotspots are near a large amount of structures is the Monument Fire. I'll turn on the perimeter so you can see what I'm talking about. This really started taking a turn for the worse when that northerly wind event came in and basically pushed this fire farther and farther down to the south into the area of Hayfork down here. And looking at the live hotspots right now, you can see that it's still showing a large amount of activity on the Monument Fire roughly over that Hayfork area. If we zoom in, it's going to be this smoke right here. So not the craziest smoke plumes that we've seen on the Hayfork Fire. And when I was reading the description, it said it was just moderate fire behavior. But when your hotspots are that close to structures, any fire behavior is more than you would want to see. So I did actually find a camera for the Hayfork Fire. Finally, it looks like it looks directly into the region of Hayfork. You can see where the camera is right there. And then if we take a look at it, you'll see a lot of smoke coming off this area, so that explains why we have those hot spots. But you also notice it's not one of those giant pyrocumulus smoke clouds like we have seen on the Monument Fire a couple times throughout the past. So certainly still seeing some activity, and much more activity than we'd like to be seeing on that area. Looking down into that activity over getting into the Hayfork area. But I'd say it's not as critical as we have seen in the past. But looking at where those hot spots are right now, that's certainly one of the top spots in California that I'm going to continue to watch. So I do know that they are working very hard to get a lot of resources in here for structure protection, get some dozer lines in. Also still working on structure protection on Junction City and resources in, I believe, Weaverville as well. One good news, I know we need some good news after seeing those hot spots right there, is in the Burnt Ranch area. It looks like the hot spots have significantly calmed down. There was a couple days where we were seeing the hot spots come into that area. I'm still looking for a damage assessment map on the Monument Fire, because there were a couple days where we saw those hot spots going into Burnt Ranch. We've seen a couple of scenes like this where the hot spots look like they're going into Hayfork. And then I did see some footage of the fire at one point going into Junction City. So I will continue to look for a damage assessment map to see if there's been any information of where some of the structures destroyed have been on this fire. But when it comes to the numbers for the Monument Fire, you can see it is up to 150,000 acres and 20% containment. Personnel, I'm interested to see, is up to 2,000. So I believe that's significantly up since the last time that we looked at it. So that's some good news there, and I imagine most of those resources are down in that Hayfork area. Actually, I'm interested to see this map. I want to see where the containment is. So it's going to show the fire perimeter where we see the red lines is where the fire is uncontained. Where you see the black lines is where the fire is contained. Slowly loading here, getting an idea that the northern edge of the fire, not seeing all that much containment, but I think a great thing to see is around that Junction City area. Again, in some cases might be too little too late, but it's great to see that we have that containment in that area right there, because that will act to further protect Weaverville moving forward, just in case we get some strong westerly winds moving in this area. Now, obviously the key place that we want to see some containment moving forward is this southern edge right here. But if you zoom in very closely, you can see where they have those black X's. That's where they have containment lines. And as of right now, based on this map, it looks like the fire has been stopped where they have those containment lines. So let's just hope that that continues to be the case and that those lines hold in that area, which would be good news for the Hayfork area. But again, that will be something that we're going to have to continue to follow as we move forward. Now, another fire that I'll briefly go over the other fires because it's all kind of a clump up here. They all started on the 29th and 30th last month with some lightning that came through. It was the Mcfarland, Monument, River Complex, Antelope. And you can see River Complex has been fairly active over the last couple of days. Still seeing some smoke coming off of the Mcfarland down there. So just looking at those hotspots. Still some hotspots from the Mcfarland fire. Not much less than in the past. I believe that's Mcfarland right there, right? Yeah. So it's on the northern edge of the Mcfarland where we still have those hotspots. River Complex is one that has seen a lot of activity over the last few days, but that one's not as near a large amount of structures, and similar case with the Antelope, not as many structures around that one. So that's why I just try to go over these ones a bit faster with the River Complex. Let's see if this has been updated. River Complex is up to 88,000 acres and 19% containment. The Monument Fire, that has to have been updated since 8 hours ago. Yeah, that one is up to 120,000 acres, but 73% containment, so some good news there. And then the Antelope Fire is around 70,000 acres with 40% containment. Now, another fire that was one of the key ones that we were looking at in the last forecast video, was the first time that we looked at it, was the French Fire down here. And what you notice on the satellite imagery is it looked like it was calm throughout most of the morning, definitely had some smoke coming off of it. And then as the temperatures came up this afternoon, as the winds came up, you start to see that smoke plume popping up there as well. I'm interested to see what the natural color fire looks like, to see if we're still seeing a lot of activity off of this one right now. So can barely see it this morning, and then you start to see that northern section of what appears to be the fire flaring up, and still seeing some heat coming off of that as we get into the more nighttime hours. So interested to see what's going on with the French Fire down there, and then we're going to try to scroll through some of the new fires that have happened as well, like I believe it's the Westward Fire and the South Fire. Sometimes that's hard to find information because they haven't created pages for it yet. That's why I'm purposely just saving those for the end to see if any new information starts coming out. But when it comes to the French Fire, that kind of paints the picture of what that satellite imagery was showing, where most of that activity was on the northern edge right there, which is a better edge to have your activity on. The last place we'd want to see it is on that eastern edge, where you can see we have a large amount of structures around that lake. And somebody did comment, and you can actually kind of see it in this imagery, is somebody said this in the live chat last time, is that for the fire to move down to these structures, it has to move downhill. And that actually works in your favor if you have these structures, because fires move much slower downhill than they move uphill. So it looks like that eastern edge of the fire has started to calm down, but I imagine that we did unfortunately get some structures destroyed in this area. As you can see, a number of those orange dots underneath where we do see that fire perimeter and those hot spots. Now, interested to see where the live hot spots are. Yeah, still looks like it's that northern edge right there. Very interested to see what kind of news comes out of the community right here, where we have a large amount of structures under those hot spots. Hopefully they were able to get some structure protection in there, but I'll have to look for some resources to see if we can find some information on that. Now, when it comes to the French Fire, this one is up to 20,000 acres, but that was 11 hours ago that it was updated, and we have seen more growth throughout this afternoon, so that will likely continue to grow. But containment is at 19%, which is actually kind of impressive for how new of a fire this is to already have that much containment. But you can see this basically sums it up. Extreme fire behavior due to dry fuel conditions, gusty winds, and long-range spot fires. So that kind of paints the picture of why this fire was able to grow as much as it was and as fast as it was. But now we have over 1,000 personnel, so that's some good news there. And then that was a key thing that they were talking about in one of the updates I was looking at. Poor humidity recoveries overnight. That means your relative humidity overnight doesn't go up to 60 or 70% like you'd like to see it, which calms the fire down. When you have poor humidity recoveries, that means it remains dry overnight, which means that the fire can remain active overnight, which means that the firefighters don't really get a good break to really put the fire to rest. Now, I am interested to see what the forecast looks like for this area, because this is an area that looked like it had the most critical fire weather forecast when we were looking at it last time. And you can see that they had those strong winds. Oh no, that's Tuesday. So less winds as of right now, which is not a huge surprise because winds usually calm down at night. As that high pressure system comes in over the next couple of days, we are still going to have some winds around 25 to 30 miles per hour, but just based on the fact that this looks better than previous forecasts, especially wind-wise. Temperature-wise, it's still going to be relatively hot in the 90s, which means you're going to be dry as well. Relative humidity most likely in the low teens. Let's see if it updates. Oh wow, even single digits right there. So certainly going to be hot and dry over the next couple of days, but wind is always the biggest factor when it comes to wildfires, and it looks like the winds are coming down a little bit. So what I'm hoping is that the fire behavior on the French fire comes down as well, but this is why I wanted to look at the fire weather forecast for it. It's because this is an area that does get extremely hot and dry, and you could see in the the InstaWeb report that they were saying that that was leading to some extreme fire behavior where they have 5% moisture content. So when your fuels are that dry, it not only leads to faster fire spread, but then they were also talking about some of the spot fires. It also makes spot fires more likely because if you get a burning ember picked up in the winds, it's dropped into those dry fuels, and then there's a 90 to sometimes even 100% chance that that burning ember turns into a spot fire or just leads to more growth and spread. So French fire, that was the Antelope Fire. We're looking right there. Sorry, I have about 50 tabs open at this point. I would imagine the fuels are about 5% down here as well, though. So I don't think that was actually a mistake to say that. I would say it's pretty safe bet that the fuels around this area might even be drier than the fuels in the Antelope Fire area. So one thing that I wanted to say before we try to figure out what's going on with some of those more current wildfires is just looking at California, air quality wise, actually looking better than in previous days. The main reason for that is it's the more typical summer patterns in California right now where we get those southwesterly winds. It's mostly onshore. And that's good news for us, bad news for Nevada, Oregon, and Idaho because all our smoke is going up there. But you can see that most of the valley, most of the Bay Area actually looks like much better air quality than this time last week. I'll remind you, when we had that northerly wind event, that's when all the smoke was being pushed down directly into California. That's when we had some of the really bad air quality. But directly under those fires, and especially in the Lake Tahoe area, that is where we do still have some not only unhealthy, but in some cases even very unhealthy to hazardous air quality. So throughout much of California, we have that yellow color, which is the moderate air quality. And then under the river complex, we're unhealthy. Under the Dixie Fire, we're unhealthy. Under the Caldor Fire especially, where we had that smoke going into Tahoe, that's where we're even very unhealthy air quality. And then you can see some of those new fires popping up in Southern California that we're going to have to cover in just a second here. You're starting to see some of the air quality impacts from those fires as we have that unhealthy air down there as well. Now, if we want to see how that smoke is going to change over the next couple of days, let's see if this plays. Sometimes they update it in the middle of my video, so we lose it. Oh, there it goes. So you can see River Complex, Dixie Fire, Caldor Fire still kicking up a lot of smoke, but most of that smoke going into Nevada, Idaho, and Oregon. You can actually see those onshore winds pick up during the evening hours and push some of that smoke out of the Bay Area and off the coast. So certainly still some smoke going on. You see more down here in Southern California now that we do have some fires popping up down there as well, but not as bad as in previous days when we had that northerly wind event blowing it directly down into California. So now I think that basically sums up the main fires that I wanted to talk about based on their current information that we're looking at in the fire weather forecast. Now I want to transition to try to look at some of those new fires that are popping up. I'd purposely save this for last because sometimes you never know what kind of information you're going to be able to find. But before I get into those, I do want to just take a quick look at the live chat to see if there has been any new questions popping up. Also, apologies if you've been posting questions in the live chat. I haven't been checking it pretty much throughout the entire course of this video because I just wanted to get as much information out there as I could. Thank you very much, Lucy Hansen, for the super chat, and also thanks for doing such a great job moderating, especially when I'm not looking at the live chat at all. It really helps to have a moderator on here who I trust to make sure that it remains friendly and informative. And it also is... Oh yeah, I always have trouble with naming the towns around a fire. That's something I should get better at going forward. Just reading some of these comments. Yeah, so I'll try to go through all of those later and see if I can answer them at some point. But again, big thank you to Lucy, because it really helps when we have a good moderator on there, because if I'm not looking at the live chat, that means I'm not answering people's questions, which means hopefully other people are answering some of those questions, which is much easier to do when there's not a bunch of trolls on there. So thank you again. But now I do want to try to do a more exploratory kind of behavior to see if we can find out what's going on with the South Fire and the Westward Fire. So we'll try to start with the South Fire first. This is the imagery I pulled up on the South Fire earlier today. Actually, let's update this to see what it looks like as of right now. See if we're still seeing some of that activity. So we'll go 6-hour time lapse. This is just north of San Bernardino. It's in San Bernardino County. And you can see the smoke plume that was coming off of it today. This is one of the new fires. As I was starting this live stream, I was seeing some new evacuation orders popping up. And you can see why with that large amount of smoke coming off it. There's a couple instances here where you're actually able to see the aircraft on the fire. Got to look fairly closely. Right there on the left you see an aircraft, but again, this is San Bernardino County, the South Fire. So the best place to sometimes find the most recent information is Twitter, and especially on my account where I only follow wildfire accounts so that we can do this kind of stuff in these videos. Actually, this could be a good thing to read. Caldor Fire is now 126,000 acres and is only 12% contained. The fire is roughly 18 miles southwest of the south shore of Lake Tahoe. So 18 miles is still quite a long distance. So, few things I will say there. It is always very good to stay updated with local resources, because we did see that one day on the Dixie Fire where it was able to move 15 miles in one day. The good news, again, on the Caldor Fire is that when we were looking at the fire weather forecast, it looked like it was going to be calming down over the next 2 to 3 days as the winds calm down. But then as we get into Monday and Tuesday, that's where we're really going to have to watch that northeastern section, as we're expecting to get some 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts from the southwest that will try to push that fire farther towards the northeast. So that's going to be a big thing that we're looking at moving forward. Oh, I noticed that somebody mentioned Bennett Fire in the live chat. So here's an update for you. It looks like the vegetation fire is now 70% contained and 50 acres. So that sounds like it's moving in a great direction, already at 70% containment there. Westward Fire, so it looks like they had some aircraft. That's one of the fires that we're interested in. I'm curious to see if there's an InstaWeb page yet for the Westward Fire. Again, this is a good little tool for you to use if you're ever curious about a fire. Nah, they don't have the page yet. What about the South Fire? Oh, they do have the page for the South Fire. So this is always one of the best things to do if you're curious about a fire. Go to InstaWeb, then type in the fire name, and then right there you can see that that fire is up to 500 acres. That was the one in San Bernardino County where we're looking at the smoke plume right there. And curious to see, this is probably the best place to find information about. So the South Fire started at approximately 1:36 p.m. on August 25th, 2021. The fire is currently 500 acres in size with 0% containment. No surprise there. Usually on the first day, they're just so focused on getting people evacuated that they can't start to worry about containment yet. Although it did look like they had some aircraft on it, so hopefully that does help with some structure protection if they were completely just focused on evacuations. Resources have been ordered and are arriving on scene to start the fire suppression efforts. So that's some good news there. Hopefully we see that percent containment come up in the next couple of days. You can see large number of evacuation orders were put in place throughout really the course of the last few hours. And looks like there's an evacuation shelter. Oh, that's one thing that I haven't mentioned in probably a week or two, but one huge thing to know is I know it might be tempting to try to use a drone to get cool footage of a wildfire, but if you use a drone, then they have to ground all their aircraft. Right there it says, if you fly, we can't. So in some cases, if they can't use aircraft, that could end up leading to more houses being destroyed. In the worst cases, that could lead to more people dying. So you might think it's a just kind of casual, get some cool footage with a drone, but if structures are destroyed or in worst case scenarios if people die, I'm pretty sure you can get some very hefty fines and possibly even some jail time. So that's always a good thing to know, and did want to emphasize that because I hadn't said that in a while. So total personnel, they do already have 275, which is impressive considering this started this afternoon, right? Yeah, August 25th right now. And it says it started 1:36 p.m. on August 25th. So that imagery that we're looking at throughout the day, that really was when the fire first started. And then amazingly, they've already have 242 personnel on the fire. So I believe San Bernardino County Fire on Twitter was posting about this one. It's right there. It's at 300 acres, but that newest report said 500 fire moving east of Sierra, north along, that's a weird way to spell Little? Am I pronouncing that right? Little Creek Road. Evac order west of Sierra and south of Little Creek Ranger Station along Little Creek Road. Looks like there's a number of other fires as well. We have Mule Fire, Ole Fire. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And then here's some imagery. Let's see if we can watch this. I'll turn the sound off. So it was hard to see exactly where the South Fire was based on that live imagery. We were just basically looking over that ridge line and looking at the smoke plume, but it does look like there are some structures in this area. So that makes me want to look at the structure map to see if we can find out exactly where this fire is and see how many structures are around it. Easiest thing to do might be, did I spell that right? Yep, this looks like the right place to look. So I wonder if it even has a fire perimeter yet. No, it doesn't. So if we were looking at the fire perimeter map, we would have just had to see that one little red spot right there. So looking at the live imagery, you can see that this has been able to grow over the last couple of hours. Again, we're looking at the South Fire right now. And you can see why this is a big concern, why Twitter is blowing up about the South Fire right now, is because you can see how many structures are around this. Now, the good news on this is that as we get into the overnight hours, temperatures will drop, winds will drop, so the fire behavior will drop. And the other good news is we do already have around 250 personnel with more on the way. But I imagine this is going to be a fire that we have to follow moving forward. So next one I want to try to see. Wasn't seeing as much information about this one, but I want to see if there's been anything posted about the Westward Fire. Potential for 2,000 plus acres if it jumps the 243, now threatening the Smith Correctional Facility. So I'd love to see a map of exactly where this is. Alright, let's try Banning High School. Let's see if this pops up. And if you're new to the live stream, it hasn't been this exploratory the whole time. If you're interested in some of the other fires, I did try to go through all the most concise information as I could earlier in this live stream. Now we're just basically trying to figure out what's going on with the South Fire and the Westward Fire. Usually the hardest times to figure out what's going on with the fire is at the very beginning, because there's not a Cal Fire page set up, there's not an InstaWeb page set up yet. So we're basically just trying to figure out what's going on and where the fire is. Let's just try Google. So it looks like Cal Fire might have a page for this. 200 acres at this point, 10% containment. And lat long. That's what we're looking for. To be able to figure out where this is, and then I want to... Oh wait, wrong search bar. Lat long. And then we're going to try to see if we can find those hotspots on the other map. So it looks like this is, yeah, we had a couple of different fires pop up almost right next to each other. So we should actually be able to see it on this map right here. So I think that's the South Fire up there. And then that is possibly the Banning Fire right there. Looks like it could be. Again, I will certainly do much more research about this one before tomorrow's update and forecast. That doesn't look like the fire perimeter is popping up yet. But zooming in there, let's see if we turn off. Yeah, I would imagine that looks like it might be the Westward Fire. That one looks like it's the South Fire. Interesting, two fires started that close together throughout the day today. So that will be something that we follow moving forward. Again, it's hard to find information on fires right when they start. I think the key things that we're going to be following moving forward, we not only the Westward and the South Fires, as more information comes out, as they get InstaWeb page, Cal Fire page, and more information there, but we're also going to be following the Hayfork area, which is on the southern edge of the Monument Fire, where looking at the structures, we do have some hotspots there, but last time we checked, when we looked at that fire perimeter map, it looked like the perimeter was holding on their containment lines, so let's hope that that continues to hold there, and let's hope that it wasn't just the map showing that it was holding there, that it actually is holding. Then another spot that we're going to keep a very close eye on is this southeastern area of the Dixie Fire. Saw a lot of smoke coming off of that part of the Dixie Fire today. You can see it right there with that couple times where we saw that pyrocumulus. Obviously more activity on the very northern part of the Dixie Fire, but less structures up in that region. So I think that's going to be a key spot to watch on the Dixie Fire. The good news on the Dixie Fire is much reduced activity around Lake Almanor, Susanville, Janesville compared to a while ago. So that is where some of the great news comes in. I think where the biggest concern is in California moving forward is the northeastern section of the Caldor Fire. In the last report that I could find, it sounded like the fire perimeter was directly up against where they have those containment lines right now. The big question mark moving forward is going to be what happens over the next couple of days. just looking at the fire weather forecast, it looks like things will be trending in the right direction as winds calm down, which hopefully will lead to a smoke inversion over the fire, which won't let as much sunlight in, which will hopefully calm the temperatures down and the relative humidity as well. But I think the big thing to focus on when it comes to the Caldor Fire is, while the next couple of days, as this high pressure system moves in over California, you can see it's more of a ridge pattern right here. That means we're getting warmer and drier. As that comes in, again, it will be getting warmer and drier, so that would theoretically lead to more fire activity, but over the next couple of days, the winds are going to be calming down significantly. So if we get that smoke inversion, then the temperatures might end up actually being 10 to 20 degrees cooler than the forecast. But the big concern moving forward, again, the last thing we want to see is the Caldor Fire to move farther to the northeast, because you can see how many structures are up here, not only around Strawberry, but as you get into the south shore of Lake Tahoe as well. Actually interested to do a measurement. So some of these hotspots already look like it's over some of these structures, but again, that's where sometimes you have to take this map with a grain of salt. It's based on satellite imagery, so it's not always perfect. Let's see how far it would be to get into where we start to see a large amount of structures. Looks like that's about 6 miles. So the reason that's my big concern is fire, as we've seen, moves in the direction that the wind is pushing it. It can also lead to spot fires like the ones we saw at Jump Highway 50 up here. And good news is, over the next few days, the winds are going to be calmer, so we're likely to see some reduced behavior. But then as we get into Monday, you'll notice that that ridge over California turns into a trough. Those isobars get a lot closer together, which means your winds are going to be picking up. And if we actually look at the winds on Monday afternoon, looks like they're getting up to 40 miles per hour, and from the exact direction that we don't want to see them coming from the southwest. That will try to push that fire farther to the northeast. So that's not only Monday afternoon, Tuesday afternoon looks like the winds are going to be even stronger and from that southwesterly direction again. So big thing that we're going to be watching over the next few days is what happens on this northeastern section. Hopefully it calms down enough with those reduced winds over the next couple of days to get some good control and containment. But that's going to be the big question mark, because as we get into Monday and Tuesday, looks like we have some critical fire weather conditions coming in. If you want to stay updated with that, you can subscribe to this channel where I try to do these videos every single day. Again, it's kind of the crunch time on my master's thesis right now. I'm officially doing my defense on October 28th, so trying to balance doing these videos and researching wildfire at the same time in a different way. So apologies for some of the missed days in the last week, but as this situation on the northeastern area of the Caldor Fire develops, that's going to be very important. So I hope to really do daily videos moving forward. So again, you can subscribe if you are interested in staying updated with not only the Caldor Fire, but all the other fires in California as well. Also, thank you very much, John, for the super chat. You and Lucy just paid for me to go to a nice dinner right now, if I can find a place that is still open. So again, apologies for not staying updated with the live chat throughout this video. I was trying to just get as much information out there as fast as I could. Hopefully in future videos we'll have the time to make it a bit more interactive, but I think that pretty much sums up the various wildfires going on right now. Again, big story we're going to be following is what happens on that northeastern area of the Caldor Fire, what happens around Taylorsville, what happens around Hayfork, and then we have to follow those new fires popping up: French Fire, South Fire, Westward Fire. I think that was the name. So a number of new fires as well that we're going to have to stay updated with. So I hope this video was helpful. As always, thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected by these wildfires. Huge thank you to all the firefighters out there. And I will see you all tomorrow as we follow these wildfires once again. Thanks for watching.